Hello, friends. Today in this lecture, we are going to talk about classical criticism. And because in our syllabus there is only Greek classical criticism, so of course, although Plato is not in our syllabus, still we begin with Plato himself. Um, and his one work that is generally prescribed everywhere is the Republic. So we'll talk a little bit about the Republic. We'll not talk about the ion. And the one idea in the ion that is about the transfer of divine inspiration from God to the poet, and from there, from the poet to the through the rhetor to the viewer. We will only stay with the Republic. So Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, that is the tradition of philosophers. And in Plato's Republic, that is around 375 BC, the idea about Callipolis, that was ruled by a philosopher king, was put into action. Republic is in 10 books in total. The first book defines justice. The second book, it tells us stories about unjust gods are untrue and they should not be taught. The third book is about the tyranny of guardians, and so on, so forth, until, of course, finally we reach the one book in which we students of literature and criticism are very much interested, that is the 10th book. The 10th book rejects imitative arts and artists. It does that for the reason that these kind of arts and these kind of artists, they feed the lower part of the soul. And because the immortal psyche is not fed by their art, therefore this art is not good. Also, Plato talks about art being at two removes from the form or the true nature of things. For example, the couch exists as an idea in the mind of God, from where it goes to the carpenter, from where to the painter, and from where we get the painting. So couch is by classical count twice removed from reality. Now for Aristotle, we will need to go to the next section. Aristotle's Poetics I have taken from S.H. Boucher's translation. There are 26 chapters in total, and the first 3 are about imitation and how poetry and imitation are intimately connected. Then in the 4th chapter, Aristotle talks about origin and development of poetry. In the 5th chapter, about comedy, epic, and tragedy. In the 6th chapter, which is a very important chapter, he defines tragedy. The 7th one, he talks about the qualities of a plot and about unity of plot. About poetic truth and probability, he talks about them in 9th chapter. In the 10th chapter, about types of plot. In the 11th chapter, and this one is important, about peripeteia, anagnorosis, and pathos. In 12th chapter, he talks about the parts of tragedy, the 6 parts, and about the tragic action. Ending in 13th chapter, tragic emotions arising from the plot in 14th. Elements of character in 15th chapter. In 16th, he talks about recognition. In 17th, the rule for tragic poet and tragedy versus epic. Remember, 17th, he talks about tragedy versus epic. 18th continues with the same rules for tragedy. 19th, he talks about thought and diction. In 20th, he talks about language. And 21st chapter is about propriety in metaphor. The 22nd chapter talks about poetry having elevation of language. And the 23rd one is about epic, tragedy, and history. The 24th chapter is a comparison of epic and tragedy. 25th defends poetry and talks about poetic truth. And finally, 26th, the last chapter, proves tragedy is greater than epic. It begins with positing imitation as human instinct, along with the instincts for harmony and rhythm. And these give rise to poetry of all kind. Now, persons, they use their natural gifts, and poetry was born. The graver spirits, they imitated noble actions and thoughts of good men. But the trivial spirits, they imitated actions of meaner persons. Epic poetry, therefore, led to tragedy, and lampoon led to comedy. Drama is a higher and larger form of art. Then he tells us that Aeschylus introduced the second actor and Sophocles introduced the third actor. That epic poetry has one meter and is narrative in form. Tragedy and epic, they imitate various characters, but they are of higher types. Tragedy must cover one revolution of the sun, but epic has no such limit. Beauty of a plot depends on its magnitude and order. Now we're going to the next section. Poetry is greater than history as it expresses the universal, not the particular. And poet is the maker of plot, the process of poesis, rather than of verses. The episodic plot is verse as it is without probable or necessary sequence. Tragedy has catharsis, effected by surprise of the happening of probable coincidences. Plots are of two types, simple and complex. The simple plot has no peripeteia and anagnorosis in the change of fortune. The complex plot has got the change of fortune accompanied by peripeteia or anagnorosis or both. The objects of recognition, that is anagnorosis, are inanimate objects, actions, or persons. There are two parts of the plot, that is peripeteia and anagnorosis, that turn upon surprises. And then there is pathos, that is the scene of suffering, death, agony, etc. Four parts of tragedy are prologue, episode, exode, and choric song. Pity is aroused by unmerited misfortune. I repeat, pity is aroused by unmerited misfortune. Fear is aroused by the misfortunes of a man like ourselves, but renowned and prosperous. A plot should be single in its issue, not double. Now we need to go to the next section. There are four characteristics of ethos. The character should be good, proper, true to life, and consistent. Deus ex machina are to be employed for events external to drama, not for unraveling of the plot. So that's an injunction against the use of Deus ex machina for resolving the at the climax by some kind of divine intervention. Recognitions are by signs, invented at will, memory awakened by sight or by the process of reasoning. The best kind of recognition arises from incidents naturally. For example, in Rex Oedipus, there are two parts of tragedy: complication and unraveling at the turning point. And there are four kinds of tragedy: complex, pathetic, ethical, and simple. Thought, that is dianoia, is every effect produced by speech. For example, proof, refutation, excitation of feeling, etc. Diction, letter, syllable, word, sentence, phrase, etc. They all will be covered under diction. There are types of words that are current, that are strange, that are metaphorical, and so on. On the chapter of on metaphor, Aristotle talks about application of an alien name by transference as the process by which metaphor works. In his chapter on metaphor, he includes in the discussion synecdoche, hyperbole, metaphor, and analogy. And the perfect style is clear without being mean. There are four kinds of epic poetry: simple, complex, pathetic, and ethical. Iliad is simple and pathetic, and Odyssey is complex and ethical. Thank you.